The sun hung low over the Nevada desert, casting long shadows across the parched earth of Fort Bragg's advanced sniper range. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the distant targets set at intervals stretching beyond a mile. 6 men in tactical gear hunched over state-of-the-art rifles, their frustration growing with each missed shot. Behind them stood Thieves Major Nathan Reeves, arms crossed over his chest, jaw clenched tight as he watched his elite team struggle. "Recalibrate the Barrett-Bore system again," Reeves ordered, his voice carrying the sharp edge of impatience. "These sensors should compensate for the thermal layer. The technology is supposed to be foolproof." The men adjusted dials and tapped at digital displays mounted atop their rifles. Thousands of dollars of cutting-edge technology rested in their hands, yet the targets remained stubbornly unmarked. At the far end of the range, almost invisible in the heat haze, stood a solitary figure. Thomas Garrison moved with the unhurried grace of a man who had long ago learned the value of patience. At 78, his frame remained lean and sinewy, though time had etched deep lines across his weathered face and turned his hair silver white. His hands, gnarled like ancient tree roots, moved with deliberate precision as he wiped down the polished wood and worn metal of a pre-1964 Winchester Model 70. The rifle belonged to another era entirely. No digital displays adorned its frame, no battery-powered optics or ballistic computers. Just wood, steel, and glass crafted by hands long since gone. Tom reached into his pocket and withdrew a silver Zippo lighter, its surface worn smooth from decades of handling. Engraved on its face were the words, "Stillness before the storm." He placed it carefully on the bench beside his rifle, using it to gauge the subtle air currents that rippled across the range. Reeves noticed the old man and frowned. The major strode toward him, the precision of his movements betraying his military bearing. His uniform was immaculate, his physique honed through thousands of hours of training. At 32, he represented the pinnacle of modern special operations, a man whose confidence in himself was matched only by his faith in technology. "What in God's name is that antique?" Reeves called out, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of his men. "And what are you doing on my range?" Tom turned slowly, his pale blue eyes clear and steady as they met the younger man's gaze. He did not speak immediately, taking the measure of the officer approaching him. "Afternoon, Major," Tom said finally, his voice a low rumble with the faintest hint of a Texas drawl. "Just doing some maintenance." Reeves stopped a few feet away, casting a dismissive glance at the old Winchester. His own rifle, a cutting-edge Barrett chambered for. 338 Lapua Magnum represented the culmination of decades of weapons development. The contrast between the two could not have been more stark. "This is a restricted training area for Tier 1 operators," Reeves said, making no attempt to mask his disdain. "Not a place for relics, both the rifle and its owner." But what Thieves Major Nathan Reeves failed to recognize was the history held in those gnarled hands. The old man standing before him had once made a shot that Pentagon officials still referred to in hushed tones as the impossible shot, a feat that had saved dozens of American lives and altered the course of a classified operation. Those faded blue eyes had once peered through rifle scopes on 3 continents, serving in conflicts most Americans had never heard of. Tom merely nodded, seemingly unaffected by the insult. He continued to clean his rifle, each movement executed with a precision born of thousands of repetitions. "I asked you a question," Reeves pressed, stepping closer. "Who authorized your presence here?" Without looking up, Tom reached into his back pocket and extracted a worn leather wallet. From it, he removed a faded identification card and handed it to the major. Reeves snatched it, glancing down with barely concealed impatience. The card was an old format, unlike the current military IDs. The photo matched the weathered face before him, though taken decades earlier. The name read Thomas Garrison, and beneath it in small print, "Permanent Special Access All Facilities." "This thing must be 20 years expired," Reeves scoffed, tossing the card onto the bench. "Listen, old-timer, I have a team trying to calibrate next-generation optical systems. We have no time for distractions or sightseers." Tom retrieved his ID, carefully inspected it for new damage, then returned it to his wallet. His gaze drifted past Reeves to the struggling team behind him. "Having trouble with the vertical dispersion on those Barrett systems?" Tom asked quietly. Reeves froze. His team had indeed been struggling with precisely that issue for the past hour. The shots were grouping with horizontal accuracy but scattering vertically, a problem their advanced ballistic computers should have corrected automatically. "What would you know about it?" Reeves asked, his voice tight. Tom shrugged slightly. Thermal layering, the heat coming off the desert floor creates invisible rivers in the air. Your sensors read the average temperature, not the variations between layers. In these conditions, you need to adjust manually. The casual accuracy of this assessment only seemed to infuriate Reeves further. The idea that this old man could diagnose in seconds what his team of experts had failed to identify was more than his pride could bear. We are not having trouble. Reeves snapped, his face flushing. We are running system diagnostics. This is advanced technology integration, something you wouldn't understand. It's not like pointing and shooting that museum piece of yours. Among the group of operators, Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Unlike his commanding officer, Rodriguez recognized something in the old man's bearing, something that spoke of hard-won experience. As Tom shifted slightly, Rodriguez caught sight of a faint scar on the old man's forearm, a distinctive pattern he had only seen in textbooks at the Special Operations Training School. Rodriguez had studied military history extensively. Something about the old man's name nagged at his memory. Garrison. Thomas Garrison. Where had he heard that name before? Then it hit him. The engraving on the old Winchester's receiver partially visible from where he stood. The faded letters that formed the words, Desert Phantom. The realization sent a chill down his spine. The situation at the range continued to deteriorate as Reeves pressed forward, now fully invading Tom's personal space. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with sweat filled the air between them. You think you're some kind of old-school legend, don't you? Reeves said, his voice dropping dangerously low. Let me tell you how things work now, old-timer. We use data. We use technology. We have drones that spot targets from 5 miles out and computers that calculate shots in microseconds. Your kind of soldier is extinct. You're a fossil. The finger jabbing toward Tom's chest seemed to trigger something in the old man's memory. For a moment, the dry landscape of the Nevada desert dissolved around him, replaced by swirling sand and the distant thunder of artillery. He wasn't a 78-year-old man in faded clothes anymore, but a 44-year-old Special Forces operator in the middle of Operation Desert Storm, leading a small team deep behind enemy lines. The memory was vivid, the taste of sand in his mouth, the weight of his pack, the lives of men depending on his next decision. He remembered the young lieutenant who had questioned his orders, then insisted that the new satellite communications would provide better intelligence than Tom's instincts. The memory of what happened next still visited him in nightmares. Tom blinked, and the desert of Iraq faded back into the training range at Fort Bragg. Reeves was still speaking, his words washing over Tom like desert wind. You probably got your training shooting at targets that didn't shoot back, Reeves continued. You have no idea what it takes to operate in modern combat zones. We are the tip of the spear. You are just a dull, rusty memory. If the insults bothered Tom, he showed no sign of it. The stillness that had defined his career as a sniper served him now, his face remaining impassive. But Rodriguez had seen enough. Quietly, he stepped away from the group and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, sending a message to a number few people had access to. The text was simple. Sir Thomas Garrison is at range 4. Major Reeves is confronting him. You may want to intervene. Miles away in the main headquarters building, a phone buzzed on the desk of General James Hartwell. The general, a decorated veteran of multiple conflicts, glanced at the message. His expression changed immediately from annoyed at the interruption to grave concern. Without a word to his staff, he stood and reached for his hat. Get my vehicle, he said simply. Now. Back at the range, Tom had gathered his cleaning supplies and was preparing to leave clearly, wishing to avoid further confrontation. But Reeves, perhaps sensing victory in the old man's retreat, was not finished. How about this? Reeves said, his tone mockingly friendly now. Since you seem to think you know so much about shooting, why don't you demonstrate, show my team how it's really done? Tom shook his head. That won't be necessary, Major. No, I insist, Reeves pressed, gesturing toward the distant targets. Unless you're afraid to embarrass it, one shot, just to see if that antique can't even reach the target. The other operators had gathered closer now, drawn by the confrontation. Most wore expressions of discomfort or embarrassment at their commander's behavior, but none intervened, except Rodriguez. He stepped forward, his voice respectful but firm. Sir, perhaps we should return to our calibration exercises. We're burning daylight. Reeves rounded on him. Did I ask for your input, Sergeant? No, sir. But I believe Mr. Garrison has clearance to be here and we have work to do. Reeves narrowed his eyes. You know this man, Rodriguez. Before the sergeant could respond, Tom placed a hand on his arm. It's all right, son, he said quietly. The major is right about one thing. Times have changed. Tom turned his attention back to his rifle, closing the cleaning kit with practice movements. As he did so, the sleeve of his shirt pulled back slightly, revealing more of the scar Rodriguez had noticed earlier. It wasn't just any scar. It was the distinctive mark left by a specialized field surgery, a technique used exclusively by an elite unit that operated deep behind enemy lines during Desert Storm. Rodriguez's eyes widened in recognition. He had read about this unit in classified briefings, a group so secretive that most of their operations remained redacted decades later. The pieces suddenly fit together, the old Winchester, the call sign engraved on its receiver, the mysterious ID card, and now the scar. He knew exactly who Thomas Garrison was, and the thought that his commander was berating a living legend made his stomach turn. 15 minutes later, everything at Range 4 would change forever. The confrontation had reached its breaking point. Reeves had physically pushed Tom aside to demonstrate the proper use of the modern Barrett system. The old man had maintained his composure, though the humiliation was evident in the tightening around his eyes. The other operators watched in uncomfortable silence, their respect for their commanding officer diminishing by the second. Then on the horizon, a dust cloud appeared. A military Humvee approached at high speed, the insignia on its side identifying it as a command vehicle. Rodriguez spotted it first, a small smile of relief crossing his features. Sir, he said, interrupting Reeves mid-sentence. We have company. Reeves turned annoyance clear on his face until he registered the vehicle approaching. His expression shifted to confusion, then concern. The Humvee skidded to a stop 30 yards away. The door swung open and a pair of polished black shoes touched the desert floor. General James Hartwell, commander of Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, straightened to his full height. 4 stars gleamed on his collar, catching the late afternoon sunlight. In the stunned silence that followed, Tom Garrison simply continued packing away his cleaning supplies, as if the arrival of a 4-star general was an everyday occurrence. Perhaps for him it once had been. Reeves snapped to attention, his team following suit instantly. General on deck, he called out sharply. The general approached with measured steps, his eyes fixed not on the rigid form of Major Reeves, but on the elderly man with the Winchester rifle. There was recognition in that gaze and something else, profound respect. What happened next would become legendary throughout Fort Bragg. As Hartwell approached, protocol demanded that Tom, as a civilian, should stand and acknowledge the general's rank. Instead, it was Hartwell who did the unthinkable. He stopped 2 paces from Tom and rendered a crisp, perfect salute. It's been a long time, Phantom. General Hartwell said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent range. Tom straightened, setting aside his rifle. His movement transformed the stoop in his shoulders, vanishing as muscle memory took over. He returned the salute with precision that belied his age. Too long, Mac, Tom replied, using a nickname that caused Reeves' eyes to widen in shock. No one called General Hartwell by anything other than his rank or sir. The 2 men clasped hands, the general's expression warming into something like affection. I see you're still carrying the old Winchester, Hartwell remarked. Tom nodded. She still shoots true. The general turned to face Reeves, whose face had drained of color. Major, I see you've met Thomas Garrison, though I wonder if you know who he really is. Reeves swallowed hard. Sir, we were just discussing the range protocols and— Spare me, Major, Hartwell cut him off. I received a concerning report about your behavior toward Mr. Garrison. Before you dig yourself any deeper, perhaps you should know exactly who you've been addressing with such disrespect. The general's voice took on a formal quality, as if reciting from a citation. Gentlemen, this is Master Sergeant Thomas Garrison, retired. Call sign Desert Phantom. Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, 3 silver stars, and a Medal of Honor, awarded in a classified ceremony that most of you don't have clearance to know about. The operator stared in silent awe. The Medal of Honor was the nation's highest military decoration, awarded for acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. To have earned one in a classified operation spoke volumes about the nature of Tom's service. In 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, Hartwell continued. Sergeant Garrison held a critical observation post alone for 72 hours after his entire team was compromised. During this time, he prevented an Iraqi Republican Guard battalion from flanking our main advance, saving an estimated 300 American lives. Reeves stood frozen, the blood draining from his face as the general continued. The rifle you so casually dismissed as a museum piece has more confirmed kills than your entire team combined. It has served in conflicts most of you only read about in redacted briefings. Hartwell's gaze hardened as he focused fully on Reeves. He personally trained the founder of the unit you now command, Major. Everything you know about long-range precision shooting can be traced back to the methodologies this man developed. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Perhaps most relevant to your current difficulties, Hartwell added with a cold smile, Mr. Garrison was part of the DARPA team that developed the foundational technology for the optical system you're currently failing to calibrate. The thermal layering issue he identified. He wrote the white paper on that atmospheric anomaly in 1987. It's probably in the user manual if you'd bothered to read it. Tom shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy with the attention. Mac, that's enough. But the general wasn't finished. To drive the point home, let's see what this fossil can do. He turned to Tom. Would you mind demonstrating Phantom for educational purposes? Tom hesitated, then gave a small shrug. If you insist. He picked up the Winchester, its worn surfaces, fitting his hands like old friends. He didn't use a bipod or sandbag, instead kneeling with a fluid grace surprising for his age. From a small box, he extracted a single cartridge he had loaded himself. Which target was giving your team trouble, Major? The general asked. A trembling operator pointed to a small steel plate barely visible in the distance. The 1,500-meter target, sir. Tom settled behind his rifle, bringing the old inertial scope to his eye. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. His breathing slowed, becoming nearly imperceptible. For a moment, he was perfectly still, a human statue in the fading desert light. Then the Winchester cracked. The sound was different from the suppressed reports of the modern rifles, a sharp, authoritative voice speaking across decades of warfare. For a full 2 seconds, there was only the whistle of the bullet through air. Then faintly, the ping of impact echoed back across the valley. Target, reported an operator who had his eye pressed to a spotting scope, his voice hushed with disbelief. Dead center hit. Tom worked the bolt action with smooth efficiency, ejecting the spent casing. He stood and placed the rifle carefully back on the bench. The entire demonstration had taken less than 10 seconds. In the silence that followed, the lesson settled over the assembled men, like the desert dust. Technology changes, but skill, experience, and fundamentals remain timeless. General Hartwell let the silence linger, then turned to Reeves. Major, you will report to my office at 0700 tomorrow to discuss your future in this command. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. Our garrison here demonstrated more professionalism in 10 seconds than you have shown all afternoon. Reeves stood rigidly at attention, his career flashing before his eyes. Yes, sir. The general then addressed the other operators. The rest of you, I suggest you take this opportunity to learn something. Mr. Garrison has graciously agreed to serve as a special consultant to our training programs. I expect you to show him every courtesy and absorb everything he's willing to teach. As the men dispersed, Hartwell turned back to Tom. I've been trying to get you to come back and teach for years. What finally changed your mind? Tom's weathered face creased in a slight smile. Michael's coming home next month. Thought I'd stick around until then. Your son, the one in Afghanistan? Tom nodded. 45 years old and still chasing danger. Must run in the family. The two old warriors stood together in the fading light silhouettes against the desert horizon. Behind them, Rodriguez approached cautiously. Sir, he said, addressing both men with equal respect. It would be an honor to learn from Mr. Garrison. Tom studied the young sergeant thoughtfully. You recognize the scar, he said. It wasn't a question. Rodriguez nodded. My father served in Desert Storm. He told me stories about the Desert Phantom. I never thought I'd meet you in person. Your father's name, Tom asked. Carlos Rodriguez, 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry. A flicker of recognition crossed Tom's face. Good man, brave under fire. Rodriguez straightened with pride. He said the same about you, sir. As the sun dipped below the western mountains, casting long shadows across the desert floor, the three men walked toward the headquarters building. Behind them, Major Reeves stood alone, his future uncertain, facing the consequences of judging a book by its worn and weathered cover. Little did he know that the old man he had dismissed so casually would soon become his greatest teacher and possibly his salvation. Dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and gold as Thomas Garrison sat on the wooden porch of his lakeside cabin. The morning air carried a crisp bite, still cool before the Nevada sun would claim the day. His weathered hands cradled a steaming mug of black coffee, the aroma mingling with the scent of pine and still water. In the distance, a pair of eagles soared over the lake surface, their reflection rippling across the water. Tom took a slow sip, savoring the moment of tranquility before the day's obligations would begin. Inside the cabin, he could hear Catherine Kate to everyone who knew her moving about the kitchen. 47 years of marriage had created a rhythm between them, a dance of familiar movements and unspoken understanding. The cabin itself was modest but comfortable, built with Tom's own hands during the first years after his retirement. The walls inside displayed the markers of a life dedicated to service, photographs of men in uniform, citations carefully framed, and maps of distant lands. Yet these weren't prominently displayed as trophies. Rather, they occupied quiet corners, personal remembrances rather than public declarations. Tom's gaze drifted to his phone, checking the time. 6:15. General Hartwell Mack would be meeting with Major Reeves right about now. The thought stirred a complex mix of emotions. He took no pleasure in the young officer's humiliation yesterday, despite the man's arrogance. Tom had seen too many promising soldiers falter at the intersection of pride and inexperience. The screen door creaked open behind him. Kate stepped onto the porch, her silver hair catching the morning light. At 75, she moved with the deliberate grace of a woman who had spent decades as a military nurse, her posture still reflecting the discipline of her service years. "You're thinking about that young major," she said, settling into the chair beside him. Not a question, but a statement born of decades reading her husband's thoughts. "He reminds me of someone," Tom admitted. Kate smiled softly. "You about 40 years ago," Tom chuckled, the sound low and rumbling. "Maybe, before you straightened me out." She reached over and placed her hand atop his. The touch conveyed volumes, shared hardships, quiet triumphs, and the gentle understanding that comes only through years of weathering life's storms together. "Michael called while you were in the shower," she said. "His unit is being rotated home next week, earlier than expected." Tom's eyes brightened at the mention of their son. "Did he sound okay?" "Tired, but good. He asked about you. I told him you're consulting again." "Did you tell him about yesterday?" Kate laughed softly. "I said you were making friends as usual." The morning light strengthened, burning off the mist that hovered over the lake. Tom finished his coffee and stood his joints protesting slightly. At 78, his body carried the accumulated toll of hard years in harsh places. Old wounds spoke to him, daily reminders of sacrifices made in distant lands. "I should get going," he said. "The general wants me at the range by 8. Kate nodded, rising with him. "Thomas," she said, using his full name, as she always did when she wanted his complete attention. "Be patient with that young man today. Remember, someone once had to be patient with you." Tom smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Yes, ma'am." Inside, he dressed simply in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt. From the closet, he retrieved a hard-sided rifle case, its surface marked by decades of use. Before closing it, he checked the Winchester one final time, a ritual as old as his career. Satisfied, he latched the case and carried it to his truck, a 10-year-old Ford that had seen better days but still ran faithfully. As he drove toward Fort Bragg, Tom's mind drifted back to Iraq 1991. Operation Desert Storm had been raging for weeks. His 5-man reconnaissance team had pushed deep behind enemy lines, tasked with providing intelligence on Iraqi Republican Guard movements near the Kuwait border. What should have been a standard observation mission had quickly deteriorated when their position was compromised. The firefight had been brief but devastating. 3 of his men killed in the initial ambush. The 4th, his spotter Robert "Ghost" Sullivan, mortally wounded. Tom had dragged Ghost to a defensible position, but the young soldier's injuries were beyond field treatment. With his dying breath, Ghost had made Tom promise to complete the mission and make it home. For the next 72 hours, Tom had held that promise. Alone with dwindling supplies and surrounded by enemy forces, he had maintained his observation post. The intelligence he provided had been crucial, allowing American forces to counter a surprise flanking maneuver that would have caught an entire battalion exposed. The memory of Ghost's final moments still visited Tom in quiet hours. The young spotter had been just 24, the same age as Jenkins, the youngest member of Reeves' team. Tom's reverie broke as he passed through the security checkpoint at Fort Bragg. The guard, recognizing him from yesterday's events news, traveled fast on military bases, rendered a respectful nod before waving him through. Range 4 appeared deserted when Tom arrived. He parked his truck and carried his rifle case to the same bench he had occupied yesterday. The morning was still young, the range silent except for the occasional call of desert birds and the whisper of wind across the sand. He had just finished setting up when he heard the crunch of boots on gravel. Turning, he saw Sergeant Rodriguez approaching, accompanied by the young soldier Jenkins. Both men wore expressions of barely contained excitement. "Good morning, sir," Rodriguez called, quickening his pace. Tom nodded in greeting. "Morning, Sergeant. You're here early." Rodriguez smiled. "Didn't want to miss anything. This is Private First Class Alex Jenkins, our team's spotter." Jenkins stepped forward, his eagerness palpable. "It's an honor, sir. My grandfather served in Desert Storm. He told me stories about—" He trailed off suddenly, unsure if mentioning Tom's legendary status was appropriate. "About the crazy sniper who held off an entire battalion." Tom finished for him, a gentle humor in his eyes. "Most of those stories got exaggerated over beers." "Not according to General Hartwell," Rodriguez said. Tom waved his dismissive hand. Mac always had a flair for the dramatic. The familiar rumble of vehicles interrupted their conversation. 3 Humvees approached, carrying the rest of the team. From the lead vehicle emerged General Hartwell, his uniform immaculate despite the early hour. Beside him walked Major Reeves, his posture rigid and expression carefully neutral. Tom watched the young officer approach, noting the subtle changes from yesterday. The arrogance had been replaced by something more complex, a mixture of embarrassment, resentment, and uncertainty. The general had clearly delivered a significant dressing down. "Thomas," Hartwell called, striding forward with hand extended. "Glad you made it." Tom shook the offered hand. "Said I would, didn't I?" The general turned to address the assembled men. "Gentlemen, as I informed you yesterday, Master Sergeant Garrison has agreed to consult with our training program. Today, he will be evaluating your current methodologies and offering insight based on his extensive experience. I expect your full cooperation and attention." He fixed Reeves with a pointed look. "Major, you will ensure that Sergeant Garrison has everything he requires." Reeves nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." With that, Hartwell departed, leaving behind a palpable tension. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The operators looked between Tom and their commanding officer, uncertain of the new dynamic. Tom broke the silence. "Major, perhaps you could show me what your team has been working on." The simple request, delivered without condescension, offered Reeves a professional lifeline. Some of the rigidity left the major's shoulders. "Of course," he replied, his tone carefully formal. "Men set up at your stations." As the team dispersed to their position, Reeves hesitated, clearly struggling with what to say next. Tom pretended not to notice the younger man's discomfort. Instead, he opened his rifle case and began his own preparations. "I understand your team specializes in extreme long-range interdiction," he remarked conversationally. Reeves seized on the professional topic. "Yes, sir. We've been developing protocols for engagement beyond 2,000 meters in varied conditions." Tom nodded. "Challenging work. What's your primary platform?" "Barrett MRAD 338 Lapua with the Bohr's digital targeting system." Reeves answered, his voice taking on a note of pride. "Paired with thermal imaging and laser range finding." "Good choice," Tom said, assembling his own rifle with practice movements. "Though technology is only as good as the fundamentals behind it." For the first time, a flash of genuine curiosity crossed Reeves' face. "The Winchester Model 70 was never designed for the ranges we work with." "No," Tom agreed, "but principles don't change. Bullet drop, wind drift, Coriolis effect, physics is physics, whether you're calculating it with computers or Kentucky windage." As they spoke, Tom noticed Rodriguez organizing the other men at their stations. The sergeant was efficiently directing the setup, showing natural leadership that caught Tom's attention. "Your sergeant," Tom observed. "He's sharp." Something like defensive pride flashed across Reeves' features. "Best in the unit, on track for officer candidate school next year." Tom made a non-committal sound and returned to preparing his rifle. He extracted a small notebook from his pocket worn and filled with handwritten ballistic tables accumulated over decades. Reeves watched with poorly concealed fascination as Tom made several notations checking conditions with nothing more sophisticated than a pocket weather meter, a small flag to gauge wind, and his experienced eye. "Let's see what your team can do," Tom suggested, nodding toward the firing line. The morning progressed with Tom observing the operators as they worked through their standard qualification course. They were undeniably skilled, hitting targets consistently at ranges that would have been considered impossible a generation earlier. Yet Tom noticed subtle issues in their methodology and over-reliance on technology that occasionally led to correctable errors. He kept his observations to himself, initially simply watching and making occasional notes. The men grew increasingly self-conscious under his silent evaluation, their performance becoming slightly stiff. After an hour, Tom approached Rodriguez's position. "Mind if I take a look?" The sergeant immediately moved aside, offering his spotter scope. Tom knelt and peered through the high-powered optics, studying the mirage effect visible in the magnified view. "Tell me what you see," Tom said, yielding the position back to Rodriguez. The sergeant looked through the scope. "Heat waves, moderate intensity." "And what does that tell you?" Rodriguez hesitated. "Wind speed approximately 3 to 5 miles per hour." "That's part of it," Tom acknowledged. "But look at the pattern. See how it shifts direction at different elevations." He pointed toward the distant ridge line. "You have multiple wind layers. Your ballistic computer is averaging them, but at extreme ranges, you need to account for each layer individually." Understanding dawned on Rodriguez's face. "The vertical dispersion we've been experiencing." Tom nodded. "Exactly." Similar interactions occurred at each position, Tom offering quiet observations without undermining the operator's confidence. By mid-morning, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to focused, the men absorbing Tom's insights with growing respect. Reeves watched from a slight distance, his expression increasingly thoughtful. The transformation in his team was evident. They were shooting better, communicating more effectively, and integrating Tom's traditional techniques with their advanced systems. At noon, they broke for lunch. The operators gathered under a shade canopy, consuming MREs and hydrating in the growing heat. Tom sat slightly apart, taking a moment to call Kate. As he ended the call, he became aware of Reeves standing nearby, 2 water bottles in hand. The major offered one wordlessly. "Thanks," Tom said, accepting the peace offering for what it was. Reeves settled onto the bench beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. For several minutes, neither man spoke. The silence stretched, not entirely uncomfortable, but weighted with unresolved tension. Finally, Reeves cleared his throat. "Sir, about yesterday," Tom raised a hand. "No need, Major." "With respect, there is." Reeves insisted, his voice low to prevent the others from hearing. "My behavior was unprofessional and inexcusable." Tom studied the younger man's face, noting the genuine remorse beneath the professional composure. "We all make mistakes, son," he said simply. "The measure of a soldier isn't never falling, it's how you pick yourself up afterward." Something in Reeves's expression shifted, a subtle relaxing of features held too tightly for too long. "The general wanted to transfer me," he admitted, "to a supply depot in Alaska." Tom nodded. "I figured as much." "You intervened." Not a question, but a statement. Seemed excessive for a momentary lapse in judgment. Reeves stared out at the desert landscape. "Why would you do that? After how I treated you?" Tom took a long drink from his water bottle before answering. "Because 40 years ago I was you." This drew a surprised look from Reeves. "Hard to believe, I know," Tom continued, "but I was every bit as arrogant. Thought I knew everything. Had the highest qualification scores in my unit, and made damn sure everyone knew it." He set the water bottle down, his gaze distant now, seeing across decades. "In '82, I was stationed in Beirut. There was an old gunnery sergeant there, Korea veteran. I treated him like he was obsolete, ignored his warnings about our perimeter security because I had modern tactical training." Tom's voice grew quieter. 3 weeks later, we lost 241 Marines in the barracks bombing. That old gunny was right about every warning he'd given. The lessons I learned from that mistake made me a better soldier and probably kept me alive through 3 more conflicts. Reeves absorbed this in silence, the weight of the story settling between them. "Good men are too hard to find to throw one away over a mistake," Tom concluded. "Even a big one." Before Reeves could respond, Rodriguez approached, signaling that the team was reassembling. The moment of vulnerability passed, replaced by professional focus. The afternoon session shifted to practical application of the morning's lessons. Tom demonstrated techniques for reading complex wind patterns, methodologies for calculating elevation adjustments without digital aids, and strategies for maintaining accuracy during extended deployments. The operators proved to be quick studies, their natural abilities enhanced by Tom's experienced guidance. Even Reeves gradually engaged more actively, his initial resistance giving way to professional curiosity. As the day wore on, Tom noticed Jenkins struggling with a particular technique for breath control during trigger pull. The young spotter's frustration was evident in his increasingly tense posture. Tom approached quietly, kneeling beside him. "Having trouble?" Jenkins nodded, embarrassment coloring his features. "Can't seem to get the timing right, sir." "Mind if I show you something?" Tom asked. When Jenkins nodded, Tom demonstrated a modified breathing technique. "My spotter in Iraq, Ghost Sullivan, had the same issue. This helped him." Jenkins tried the modified approach, his next shot striking significantly closer to center mass on the target. "Ghost Sullivan," Jenkins repeated. "Was he the one who—" "Died in my arms," Tom finished. "Yes, finest spotter I ever worked with. Would have made an outstanding shooter himself if he'd had the chance." Something in Tom's tone made Jenkins look up sharply. "You still think about him?" It wasn't a question, but Tom answered anyway. "Every day. That's the thing they don't tell you about command. You never forget the ones you couldn't bring home." As shadows lengthened across the range, General Hartwell returned. He observed the training session from a distance, noting the transformed atmosphere. Where yesterday there had been tension and conflict, now there was focused purpose. Even more telling was the sight of Reeves and Tom standing side by side discussing targeting methodology with genuine engagement. Eventually, Tom called an end to the day's training. The operators began breaking down their equipment, their movements now incorporating subtle adjustments based on Tom's guidance. Hartwell approached as Tom was packing his own rifle. "Looks like progress," the general observed. Tom nodded. "Good men, solid fundamentals beneath all that technology. And Reeves has potential, if he can get out of his own way." The general smiled slightly. "Reminds me of someone I used to know." Tom snorted softly. "You and Kate both." Hartwell's expression grew more serious. "The Pentagon called this morning. They're revising the Advanced Sniper Qualification Program, asked for my input. And I told them we had just acquired the perfect consultant." Tom frowned. "Mac, hear me out," Hartwell interrupted. 3 weeks. Help us update the training protocols to incorporate both traditional skills and new technology. These kids need what you know, Tom." Tom gazed across the range where Reeves was directing the final cleanup. The major was different today, still precise and demanding, but with an attentiveness that hadn't been present before. "Let me think about it," Tom said finally. Hartwell clapped him on the shoulder. "That's not a no, which is better than I usually get from you." As the general departed, Rodriguez approached carrying Tom's rifle case. "We're finished here, sir. Can I help you with anything else?" Tom shook his head. "I'm all set, Sergeant. Good work today." Rodriguez hesitated, then asked, "Will you be returning tomorrow?" "Planning on it," Tom replied. "Still have a lot to cover." Relief showed briefly on the sergeant's face. "The team was wondering, that is, we were hoping you might share some of your experiences for instructional purposes." Tom raised an eyebrow. "War stories, you mean?" Rodriguez had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Yes, sir. Particularly Desert Storm, the operation that earned you the Medal of Honor." "Most of that's still classified," Tom said. "The parts that aren't, then," Rodriguez pressed gently, "it would mean a lot to the men." Tom considered the request. These young operators lived in a different world than he had, one of instant satellite communications, drone reconnaissance, and real-time intelligence. Yet beneath the technological veneer, they faced the same fundamental challenges: maintain position, acquire target, execute, mission, return home alive. "We'll see," he said finally. "Tomorrow's supposed to be about practical application, not ancient history." Rodriguez smiled. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As the sergeant rejoined his team, Tom completed his packing and headed toward his truck. He was surprised to find Reeves waiting beside the vehicle. "Sir," the major said stiffly, "I wanted to thank you for today. The team learned more than they have in a month of standard training." Tom studied him for a moment. "They're good soldiers, reflect well on their leadership. Reeves blinked clearly, not expecting the compliment. Thank you, sir. See you tomorrow, Major. Tom drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as Reeves stood at attention until the truck disappeared from view. The sun was setting behind the mountains, now bathing the desert in golden light. Tom felt a familiar weariness settle into his bones, the good kind that comes from purposeful work. His phone rang as he reached the main road. Kate's name flashed on the screen. Hey, darling, he answered. How was it? She asked. Tom considered the question. Productive. And the Major, coming around, reminds me of someone. Kate's laugh warmed him through the phone. You keep saying that. Should I be jealous? Of a younger, more hard-headed version of me? Hardly. Dinner's waiting when you get home, she said. And Thomas, I'm proud of you. The simple statement caught him off guard. For what? For still finding ways to serve, for passing on what you know instead of just fading away. Tom felt something tighten in his chest. See you soon, he said softly. The drive home took him past the lake, its surface now painted with sunset colors. Tom pulled over at a scenic overlook, suddenly needing a moment of quiet reflection. He thought about Ghost Sullivan, about the promise made to a dying man 30 years ago. About Michael following in his footsteps despite knowing the cost. About Reeves, Rodriguez, Jenkins, and the others, the next generation of warriors who would face their own impossible moments in distant places. For so many years after retirement, Tom had kept to himself, tending his wounds, both physical and spiritual, in private. He'd resisted Mac's repeated attempts to bring him back into the fold, convinced his time had passed. Perhaps he'd been wrong. The Zippo lighter rested in his pocket as it had every day since Iraq. He withdrew it, thumbing the worn surface where the engraving had nearly been polished away by decades of handling, stillness before the storm. Ghost had given it to him the night before their final mission. To remind you to find the calm center, he'd said. As Tom watched the sunset reflect off the still waters of the lake, he made his decision. The cabin was warm and fragrant with cooking smells when Tom arrived home. Kate met him at the door, instantly reading the resolution in his expression. You're going to do it, she said. The consulting position? Tom hung his hat on the rack beside the door. 3 weeks, helping update the training protocols. Kate smiled. Good. They moved into the kitchen together, falling into their easy rhythm. As Kate served the meal she'd prepared, Tom found himself thinking about how intertwined their lives had become: the military nurse and the special operations soldier, each understanding the unique demands of service. Michael will be glad to see you engaged again, Kate remarked as they ate. He worried about you getting too isolated out here. Tom nodded. Kid worries too much. Like father, like son. After dinner, Tom stepped out onto the porch again. Night had fallen completely now, the stars emerging in brilliant clarity over the lake. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, a reminder of how vast the world was beyond their quiet corner. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Sir, it's Jenkins. Sergeant Rodriguez gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thanks for today. The breathing technique helped a lot. Tom found himself smiling slightly as he typed a reply. Good work today. More tomorrow. As he slipped the phone back into his pocket, a sudden flash of memory transported him back to Iraq. The crushing heat, the constant danger, Ghost Sullivan beside him in their hidden observation post, both men covered in camouflage and dust. They'd been watching an Iraqi Republican Guard unit preparing for a flanking maneuver that would have caught American forces completely exposed. We need to warn them, Ghost had said, his voice tight with urgency, but their communications had been compromised. Using the radio would reveal their position to enemy direction-finding equipment. The nearest friendly forces were 8 miles away across open desert. If we move, we lose eyes on target, Tom had replied. If we stay silent, our guys get slaughtered. It was an impossible choice: sacrifice themselves or sacrifice hundreds of fellow soldiers. Ghost had checked his weapon, his young face set with determination. I'll create a diversion. Draw them east. You make the run west to the rally point, call in the coordinates. Negative, Tom had responded immediately. We move together or not at all. But Ghost had already made his decision. Too slow together. Need speed now. He'd gripped Tom's shoulder. This is the mission, Sarge. Get that intel through. Promise me. The memory faded, leaving Tom standing alone on his porch, the weight of that long-ago promise still palpable. He had made it to the rally point, called in the coordinates, and returned to find Ghost. But by then it had been too late. The stillness of the night enveloped him, a sharp contrast to the chaos of that distant battlefield. Tom breathed deeply, centering himself in the present moment. Inside, he heard Kate moving about, preparing for bed. The sound anchored him, a reminder of all he had gained in the years since Iraq. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, not a return to the past, but a bridge between generations. The lessons of Ghost Sullivan and countless others would live on through Jenkins, Rodriguez, and yes, even Reeves. The fundamental truths of their profession would endure, enhanced rather than replaced by technology. Tom's hand closed around the Zippo in his pocket. "Stillness before the storm," he murmured to the night. Then he turned and went inside to Kate, to home, to the peace he had earned through decades of storm. The next morning dawned with unexpected cloud cover, a rarity in the Nevada desert. Tom arrived at Range 4 early, before any of the operators. The diffuse light created ideal conditions for long-range shooting, no mirage effect, to distort sight pictures, consistent temperature across the range. He was setting up his equipment when a Humvee approached. To his surprise, Major Reeves emerged alone. "Morning, sir," Reeves called, carrying a large case. "Thought I'd get an early start." Tom nodded in greeting. "Good thinking. Conditions are perfect today." Reeves set his case down and began assembling his rifle with practiced efficiency. Tom noted subtle changes in the Major's approach, more attention to the basics, less reliance on the electronic systems. "Mind if I ask you something, sir?" Reeves said after a few minutes of companionable silence. "Go ahead." "Yesterday you mentioned Beirut. Were you there when—" "The barracks bombing, yes." Tom's voice remained steady, though the memory still carried its sting. "Lost a lot of good men that day." Reeves nodded solemnly. "My father was supposed to be there. Got reassigned at the last minute." Tom looked up sharply. "Your father was a Marine. 26 years, Force Recon, retired as a Master Sergeant." Understanding dawned on Tom. "That explains a few things." Reeves continued assembling his rifle, his movements precise. "He always said I had big shoes to fill. Guess I've been trying too hard to make my own footprints instead." "Nothing wrong with blazing your own trail," Tom observed, "but no sense ignoring the map drawn by those who went before you either." A small smile touched Reeves' lips. "Yes, sir." They worked in silence for a while, each man preparing for the day's training. As they finished, Reeves spoke again. "Sir, the team would be honored if you would share some of your experiences today." "For instructional purposes," he added quickly. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Rodriguez put you up to this." "Actually, it was Jenkins, but we all want to hear it." The rumble of approaching vehicles signaled the arrival of the rest of the team. Tom considered the request as he watched the operators disembark and begin setting up their stations with newfound precision. "We'll see," he said finally. "Let's focus on practical application first." As the morning progressed, the operators demonstrated marked improvement. The techniques Tom had shown them the previous day were already becoming integrated into their procedures, enhancing rather than replacing their advanced methodologies. During a brief break, General Hartwell arrived with an unexpected visitor, a civilian contractor in his 50s wearing khakis and a polo shirt. Tom recognized him immediately. "Logan," he called in greeting. "Been a while." Dr. James Logan, lead ballistics engineer for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, grinned broadly. "Tom Garrison. Max said you were here, but I had to see for myself." The two men shook hands warmly. Logan turned to the assembled operators. "Gentlemen, you have no idea how fortunate you are. This man taught me everything I know about practical ballistics." Reeves looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Dr. Logan designed the targeting system you're using," Major Hartwell explained. "He's here to observe and gather feedback for the next generation." Logan nodded enthusiastically. "And who better to provide insight than the man who wrote the original algorithms? We're still using Tom here, is the grandfather of modern precision targeting systems, though he'd never admit it." The operators exchanged glances of renewed surprise. Their respect for the old veteran visibly deepened. "Don't oversell it, James," Tom said dryly. "I just provided field observations. You did the real work." "False modesty doesn't suit you, Tom," Logan replied. "The Garrison equations are still the foundation of every advanced ballistic computer in service." Reeves looked genuinely shocked. "The Garrison equations. You're that Garrison," Tom sighed, shooting a reproachful look at Logan. "It's just math, Major. Nothing special." "Nothing special?" Logan repeated incredulously. Just revolutionize long-range shooting and save countless lives. But sure, just math. General Hartwell, observing the exchange with evident amusement, intervened. Ordered Logan will be joining us today to evaluate the integration of traditional techniques with current technology. Carry on with your training program. As the session resumed, Tom found himself working alongside Logan, the two old colleagues falling into familiar patterns of collaboration. They moved from station to station, observing the operators and discussing potential improvements to the targeting systems. You know, Logan said quietly as they watched Jenkins successfully engage a target at extreme range. These systems are good, but they're still just tools. Without the fundamentals you're teaching them, they're unreliable at best, dangerous at worst. Tom nodded. Technology changes. Physics doesn't. Which is why we need you on the development team, Tom. 3 weeks of consulting is a start, but we could use your expertise full-time. Tom shook his head. I'm retired, James. Happy that way. Logan smiled knowingly. Says the man who spent all day yesterday training elite operators and is back for more today. Face it, Tom, you've still got too much to contribute to stay on the sidelines. Before Tom could respond, a commotion at the command tent drew their attention. General Hartwell was engaged in an intense radio conversation, his expression grave. Tom felt a familiar tightening in his gut, the soldier's instinct that trouble was brewing. He made his way toward the tent, Logan following closely. As they approached, Hartwell ended the transmission. His eyes met Tom's, and something in them sent a cold chill down the old veteran's spine. What is it, Mac? Tom asked quietly. Hartwell hesitated, then nodded toward the tent's interior, where they could speak privately. Once inside, he spoke in a low voice. Just got word from Afghanistan. Michael's unit was ambushed during a patrol near the Pakistan border. Heavy casualties. The world seemed to freeze around Tom. Michael. Wounded but alive, Hartwell said quickly. Being evacuated to Germany. That's all I know right now. Tom's mind raced through calculations, distances, timelines, connections. I need to get to him. Already arranged, Hartwell assured him. Military transport leaves from Edwards Air Force Base tonight. Kate's being notified now. Tom nodded mechanically, his training taking over where emotion threatened to overwhelm. Thank you. Of course. Hartwell placed a hand on his shoulder. He's tough, Tom, like his old man. Tom stepped out of the tent, the bright desert sunlight, suddenly harsh and unforgiving. The operators continued their drills, unaware of the personal earthquake that had just struck their instructor. Logan approached cautiously. Bad news, Michael's been wounded. Tom said the words, feeling strange in his mouth. Afghanistan? Logan's expression shifted to deep concern. I'm so sorry, Tom. Anything I can do? Take over here. I need to get home to Kate. As Tom moved to retrieve his rifle, Reeves intercepted him, immediately sensing something was wrong. Sir, can I help with anything? Tom hesitated, then made a decision. Major, I need to leave immediately. Family emergency. Understanding dawned in Reeves' eyes. Of course, sir. Let me assist with your equipment. Together, they quickly packed Tom's rifle and gear. As they finished, Tom paused. The training program, he said, it needs to continue. Reeves nodded firmly. We'll maintain the schedule, sir. Apply everything you've taught us. Good. Tom closed his rifle case with finality. Rodriguez has solid instincts. Jenkins needs confidence, not correction. The others are coming along well. I'll look after them, Reeves promised. And sir, when you return, we'll be ready for the next phase. The simple statement carried an underlying message. They would be waiting for him, expecting him back. A commitment and a promise. Tom extended his hand. Reeves grasped it firmly. Thank you, Major. As Tom drove away from Range 4, his mind was already with Michael, his son, his legacy, the continuation of a tradition of service that stretched back generations. The desert landscape blurred around him, past and present merging in his consciousness. Ghost Sullivan's voice echoed across the decades. This is the mission, Sarge. Now the mission was different, but no less critical. Tom pressed the accelerator, heading home to Kate to pack to prepare for another journey into uncertainty. Behind him on the range, Major Nathan Reeves gathered his team. The men looked to him questioningly, sensing the sudden change in atmosphere. Gentlemen, Reeves announced, his voice carrying the new weight of genuine authority. Sergeant Garrison has been called away on a family matter. Our training continues. He's shown us the path. Now it's on us to follow it. Rodriguez stepped forward. What's happened, Sir? Reeves considered for a moment, then decided the men deserved the truth. His son, a serving officer in Afghanistan, has been wounded in action. A solemn silence fell over the group. These men who lived daily with the possibility of such news for themselves understood immediately the gravity of the situation. When he returns, Reeves continued, we will show him that his time with us was well invested. Until then, we apply everything he's taught us. No shortcuts, no reliance on technology without understanding the fundamentals beneath it. The operators nodded in unified purpose. In just 2 days, Tom Garrison had transformed their unit, bridging the gap between tradition and innovation, between the lessons of the past and the challenges of the present. As clouds gathered on the horizon promising rare desert rain, the team returned to their stations with renewed focus. The quiet legend of the Desert Phantom had touched their lives briefly but profoundly, leaving an indelible mark on their professional development. And somewhere over the eastern mountains, a military transport was being prepared to carry a father to his wounded son, continuing a cycle of service and sacrifice that defined the warrior's path across generations. The storm was coming, but first there would be stillness, the calm center from which all effective action flows. The Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany stood like a fortress of healing amidst rolling green hills. Its modern architecture of glass and steel belied the ancient battles being fought within soldiers wrestling with wounds both visible and invisible, the continuing price of service paid in flesh and blood. Thomas Garrison moved through the sterile corridors with the quiet determination that had carried him across countless battlefields. Though his body showed the inevitable toll of 78 years, his stride remained purposeful, his eyes alert and focused. Catherine walked beside him, her nurse's training evident in the way she scanned each medical station they passed, assessing equipment and procedures with professional interest, despite her personal worry. 3 days had passed since they'd received word of Michael's injury. 3 days of hurried preparations, a military transport flight across the Atlantic, and finally arrival at the hospital where their son had been evacuated. Room 417, Kate said, checking the information they'd been given at the reception desk. Surgical recovery wing. Tom nodded, his expression betraying nothing of the storm of emotions beneath. They had been told little about Michael's condition, only that he had sustained injuries during an ambush near the Pakistan border, that he was stable, and that he would be transferred back to the United States once his condition allowed. For a man who had spent decades making split-second decisions with limited intelligence, the lack of information was both familiar and agonizing. They reached room 417, pausing at the closed door. Kate's hand found Tom's, squeezing gently. The gesture conveyed volume, strength offered, and accepted partnership forged through decades of similar moments. Tom knocked once, then pushed the door open. The room was standard military medical, functional, clean and sparse. Sunlight streamed through half-drawn blinds, casting striped patterns across the bed where Captain Michael Garrison lay. At 45, he had his father's build and his mother's eyes. His right leg was elevated and heavily bandaged. An IV line ran into his left arm, and monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside the bed. When he saw his parents, Michael's face broke into a tired smile. "Mom, Dad, you didn't have to come all this way." Kate moved immediately to his side. Mother and nurse combined as she checked the monitors, while simultaneously leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Try to stop us." Tom remained at the foot of the bed, taking in every detail of his son's condition with experienced eyes. He noted the location of the bandages, the color in Michael's face, the alertness in his gaze despite pain medication. "How bad?" Tom asked simply. Michael met his father's gaze. Between them had always existed the soldier's understanding. No platitudes, no minimizing, just truth. IED followed by small arms fire. 3 KIA in our unit. I caught some shrapnel in the right leg, severed the femoral artery. Medic saved my life with a tourniquet. Doc says I'll keep the leg, but full recovery will take time. Tom nodded, processing the information. "The rest of your team, extracting back to base when I left. Mission parameters compromised, but primary objectives achieved." Kate made a small sound, half sigh, half laugh. "You two, 5 minutes and already talking like you're in a briefing." The observation broke the tension. Michael's smile softened the lines of pain around his eyes. "Sorry, Mom. How about hello, great to see you. How was your flight?" Kate straightened the blankets unnecessarily, a mother's habitual fussing. The flight was military transport, so exactly as comfortable as you'd expect. Your father spent most of it staring out the window, probably calculating wind vectors. Tom moved to the side of the bed opposite Kate, finally allowing himself to rest a hand on his son's shoulder. The touch conveyed everything words could not relieve concerned pride. "They treating you all right?" he asked. "German medical teams are top-notch," Michael confirmed, "but they say I'll be transferred to Walter Reed in 2 days. Apparently I rate a medical evacuation flight." "We'll be on it with you," Kate said firmly. Michael looked between his parents, noticing something in his father's bearing. "You were in the middle of something when this happened, weren't you, I can tell?" Tom shrugged slightly. "Nothing important." "Dad?" Kate gave Tom a pointed look. "Your father was consulting at Fort Bragg, teaching a team of young operators who could use his experience." Michael's eyebrows rose. "You finally took General Hartwell up on his offer, after turning him down for, what, 15 years? "Needed something to keep me busy," Tom said dismissively. But Michael knew his father too well. "Who are they? What unit?" Tom recognized the diversionary tactic, a soldier shifting focus away from his own condition, but allowed it. "Delta Force training cadre, young major named Reeves and his team, working on extreme long-range protocols." For the next hour, they talked about safer topics: Tom's consulting work, Kate's community activities, news from home. The conversation carefully avoided the ambush that had landed Michael in this hospital bed, though it hung in the air between them, an unacknowledged presence. As evening approached, a doctor entered, a German physician with excellent English in a precise manner. He reviewed Michael's chart and examined the leg wound, nodding with satisfaction. "Good progress, Captain Garrison. The grafts are taking well. We will change the dressings again tomorrow, but I am pleased with the healing." He turned to Tom and Kate. "You must be the parents. Your son is fortunate. Quick action in the field saved both his life and his leg." "Who was the medic?" Tom asked. The doctor checked the chart. "A Sergeant Wilson, according to the field report." Tom nodded, committing the name to memory. Debts of that magnitude needed to be acknowledged. "Visiting hours end at 8, the doctor continued. "Captain Garrison needs rest to continue his recovery." After he departed, Kate excused herself to find coffee, leaving father and son alone for the first time. Michael studied his father's face. "You're thinking about it, aren't you? The ambush." Tom's gaze shifted to the window, where the German countryside spread out in peaceful contrast to the war zones his son had left behind. "Hard not to. It wasn't like Iraq, Dad. Different terrain, different enemy. Same results." Tom's voice carried the weight of experience. "Men who don't come home. Others who come home changed." Michael was quiet for a moment. "We knew the risks when we signed up, just like you did." The simple statement hung between them, a recognition of the choice that bound them across generations. Not just father and son, but soldiers who had walked similar paths, separated by decades, but united by purpose. Tom turned back from the window. "Your mother worried this would happen when you enlisted." "And you?" "I knew it might." Tom's weathered hand rested on the bed rail. "Hoped it wouldn't. Prepared for it anyway." Michael shifted slightly, wincing as the movement disturbed his injured leg. "They'll probably reassign me to training when I recover. No more field operations with this leg." The implication was clear: a career altered, a path redirected. Tom recognized the uncertainty in his son's voice, the question of identity that came with such transitions. "There are many ways to serve," Tom said quietly. "Took me years to learn that." Michael nodded, absorbing the wisdom of his father's experience. "The kids you're training at Bragg, they're lucky to have you." Tom made a non-committal sound. "They're good soldiers, quick learners. Even the major you mentioned, Reeves." A slight smile crossed Tom's face. "Especially him, once he got out of his own way." The door opened as Kate returned with coffee. She handed cups to both men, then took the chair beside Michael's bed. "What did I miss, Wim?" "Dad was just telling me about his students," Michael said. Kate's knowing glance at Tom spoke volumes. "He's making a difference there, though he'd never admit it." Tom sipped his coffee, deflecting the praise. They'd have figured it out eventually. The conversation continued lighter now, with Michael sharing what he could of his deployment and Tom offering occasional insights from his consulting work. As 8 o'clock approached, a nurse entered to administer evening medications and check Michael's vitals. "We'll be back first thing tomorrow," Kate promised, gathering her belongings. Michael nodded, fatigue beginning to show in his features as the pain medication took effect. "Looking forward to it. And Dad, don't abandon those kids at Bragg for too long. Sounds like they need you." Tom squeezed his son's shoulder. "Rest. Focus on recovery." As they left the hospital, the German evening was mild, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tom and Kate walked in companionable silence to their temporary quarters on the base adjacent to the medical center. "He looks better than I expected," Kate said finally. Tom nodded. "Good color, alert, tracking well. The doctor says the nerve damage should heal with time and therapy." They reached their small apartment, the temporary housing provided for families of wounded personnel. As Kate made tea in the kitchenette, Tom's phone buzzed with a message. He checked the screen, a text from Sergeant Rodriguez. "Sir, just checking in. The team is maintaining the training schedule as directed. Major Reeves has been implementing your techniques with impressive results. We hope your family's situation improves soon." Tom composed a brief reply. "Thank you for the update. Continue as planned. We'll advise on return timeline when possible." As he set the phone down, Kate handed him a cup of tea. "News from your students. Progress report." Tom settled into a chair by the window. "They're carrying on with the training program." Kate studied her husband's face. "You're torn." It wasn't a question. After nearly half a century together, she could read him better than anyone. "Michael needs us," Tom said simply. "Yes, he does," Kate agreed. "And those young men at Bragg need you too. Both can be true at once." Tom sipped his tea, gazing out at the unfamiliar landscape. "When did you get so wise?" Kate smiled. "I've always been wise. You just finally started noticing." 2 days later, Michael was cleared for medical evacuation to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in the United States. The C-17 Globemaster III transport was configured for medical transport, with Michael and 5 other wounded personnel attended by a flight medical team. Tom and Kate were permitted to accompany them, seated in a designated family area. As the massive aircraft crossed the Atlantic, Tom found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. His own deployments, the years of service, the wounds visible and invisible that he'd carried home. Now Michael walked or would walk again a similar path. His phone contained several more messages from Fort Bragg. Rodriguez provided regular updates on the team's progress. Jenkins had sent a photograph of the group all giving thumbs up around a target sheet showing excellent grouping at extreme range. Even Reeves had sent a message, formal in tone but sincere in content, expressing hopes for Michael's recovery and assurance that the team was applying Tom's teachings effectively. Kate, returning from checking on Michael, noticed Tom's thoughtful expression. "Penny, for your thoughts." "Just thinking about connections," Tom replied. "Threads that run through time." She settled beside him, their shoulders touching. "Between you and Michael. Him, me, those young operators at Bragg, Ghost Sullivan, all of us linked by choices made and paths taken." Kate nodded, understanding. "The brotherhood of service." "Something like that." The flight continued through the night, the wounded men sleeping under the watchful eyes of the medical team. Tom dozed intermittently, decades of field operations having taught him to rest when possible without falling into deep sleep. They landed at Andrews Air Force Base in the early morning. The wounded were transferred to ambulances for the short journey to Walter Reed. Tom and Kate followed in a transport provided for families. Walter Reed presented a stark contrast to the German facility. Larger, busier, unmistakably American in its efficiency and scale. Michael was assigned a private room in the orthopedic recovery wing, his status as an officer and the nature of his injuries warranting specialized care. The next week fell into a rhythm of hospital visits, consultations with specialists, and the beginning of Michael's physical therapy. Tom observed each session with the calculating eye of a man who had rehabilitated his own body from numerous injuries, while offering quiet encouragement when frustration mounted. 10 days after their return to American soil, General Hartwell arrived at Walter Reed. Tom was sitting with Michael discussing advances in prosthetic technology for a fellow officer down the hall when the general appeared in the doorway. "Permission to enter," Hartwell asked formally. Michael attempted to straighten in his bed. "General, sir, of course." Hartwell stepped in his uniform, immaculate as always. He carried a small package under one arm. "Captain Garrison, good to see you on the mend. Your father's been keeping me updated." Tom rose, extending a hand which the general shook firmly. Didn't expect a personal visit, Mac. Had business in D.C. anyway. Hartwell replied, though all three men knew the schedule of a four-star general rarely allowed for casual hospital visits. Thought I'd check on Michael and bring news from Bragg. He set the package on the bedside table. From Major Reeves and his team. They asked me to deliver it personally. Michael reached for the package with interest. Dad's been telling me about them. Sounds like quite a group. They've become one, Hartwell confirmed, shooting a meaningful glance at Tom. Largely thanks to your father's influence. Michael unwrapped the package to reveal a leather-bound journal. Opening it, he found messages from each member of the team, expressions of respect for his service, wishes for his recovery, and gratitude for his father's teaching. Tucked into the back cover was a group photograph taken at range 4, the team arrayed behind their rifles with Major Reeves standing beside Tom. They've been asking when you're coming back, Hartwell said to Tom. Reeves especially. Tom raised an eyebrow. They're in capable hands with you and Logan. It's not the same. Hartwell's tone was matter-of-fact. You connected with them. Bridged the gap between old school and new technology in a way neither James nor I could manage. Michael was examining the photograph closely. Is this the major who gave you a hard time when you first arrived? Tom nodded. Reeves, good officer once he stopped relying solely on gadgets. He looks like he's actually listening to you here. Michael observed a hint of amusement in his voice. Miracle worker as always, Dad. Hartwell chuckled. You should have seen the transformation. From open hostility to genuine respect in 48 hours. Your father always did have a gift for turning antagonists into allies. Tom shifted uncomfortably under the praise. He just needed perspective. Speaking of perspective, Hartwell continued, the Pentagon has approved the training program revisions. They want implementation at all sniper schools within 6 months. I told them we had the perfect consultant to oversee the transition. The implication hung in the air. Tom glanced at Michael, whose expression had grown thoughtful. You should do it, Dad, Michael said quietly. It's important work. Michael's recovery comes first, Tom replied firmly. I'm not going anywhere, Michael countered, and I'll have the best care available right here. Mom's already intimidated half the nursing staff into treating me like royalty. Hartwell smiled. Kate always was a force of nature. The program needs continuity, Tom argued. I can't split my attention. Michael and Hartwell exchanged knowing glances. Tell him, sir, Michael prompted. The general cleared his throat. I've arranged for Michael's continued rehabilitation to take place at Bragg once he's cleared for transfer. Walter Reed has approved the recommendation. He'll have access to the same quality of care, and you can resume the consulting position without being separated from your family. Tom looked between his son and his old friend, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered by a carefully coordinated campaign. You two cooked this up behind my back, Michael grinned. Actually, it was Major Reeves who suggested it. The general just made it happen. Tom shook his head in disbelief. Reeves? He called me directly, Hartwell confirmed. Said, and I quote, we need Sergeant Garrison back, sir. The program isn't complete without him. If family obligations are keeping him away, perhaps we can accommodate those needs rather than losing his expertise. The words hung in the air, evidence of a profound transformation in the once arrogant officer who had dismissed Tom as a relic just weeks earlier. Pretty persuasive argument, Michael added. And honestly, Dad, I'd rather recover somewhere I can see what you're doing. Maybe even contribute once I'm mobile again. Tom looked out the window considering the proposal. The training program at Bragg had indeed been left incomplete. The operators were making progress, but the integration of traditional techniques with modern technology was still in its early stages. And if Michael could be there too, receiving the care he needed while remaining close to family, I'll think about it, Tom said finally, which all present recognized as Tom Garrison's version of agreement. Hartwell checked his watch. I need to head back for a meeting at the Pentagon. Michael, good to see you on the mend. The Army needs officers with your experience. As the general departed, Michael studied his father's expression. You're worried about going back. Tom moved to the window, gazing out at the hospital grounds where other wounded warriors worked through their rehabilitations. Not worried, just questioning the value. What value of what I have to teach? Tom turned back to face his son. The world's changed, Michael. Warfare's changed. Technology's advanced beyond anything we imagined in my day. Michael was quiet for a moment. When I was in that ambush, with rounds incoming and men down, you know what saved us. Tom waited. Basic fundamentals. Taking cover, a returning accurate fire, buddy aid calling for support, the same skills soldiers have used for generations. Michael leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. The fancy equipment helps, sure. But when everything goes sideways, it's the basics that keep you alive. That's what those kids at Bragg need from you. Not just how to use their tools, but how to function when the tools fail. The wisdom in his son's words struck Tom with unexpected force. It was what he himself had been trying to teach Reeves and his team, but hearing it articulated by Michael, a bridge between Tom's generation and the current one, lent it new power. "When did you get so wise?" Tom asked, echoing his earlier question to Kate. Michael smiled. "Had good teachers." 2 weeks later, a military medical transport touched down at Fort Bragg. Captain Michael Garrison, now able to navigate short distances with crutches, emerged with Catherine at his side. Tom followed, carrying their minimal luggage. Waiting on the tarmac was a small, welcoming committee, General Hartwell, Dr. Logan, and to Tom's surprise, Major Reeves in full-dress uniform. As they approached, Reeves snapped to attention and saluted. "Captain Garrison, Major Nathan Reeves, Special Operations Training Cadre. Welcome to Fort Bragg, sir." Michael returned the salute. "At ease, Major. My father's told me about your team. Impressive work you're doing." "Thank you, sir. We've learned from the best." Reeves turned to Tom. "Sergeant Garrison, the team is assembled at Range 4, continuing the protocols you established. They're eager for your return." The formality in Reeves' manner was tempered by genuine respect, a far cry from the dismissive arrogance he had displayed during their first meeting. The transformation was even more striking in person than it had been in the photographs and messages. "Good to see you, Major," Tom said, extending a hand, which Reeves shook firmly. "Housing has been arranged for all of you," Hartwell informed them. "Captain Garrison will begin his physical therapy regimen tomorrow at the base medical center. The therapists have been briefed on his case." "And the training program?" Tom asked. "Awaiting your input for the next phase," Reeves replied. "We've documented the results so far. Significant improvements across all metrics." As they moved toward the waiting vehicles, Tom found himself walking alongside Reeves while Hartwell discussed medical details with Michael and Kate. "Your idea," Tom said, "bringing Michael here for his recovery." Reeves nodded. "It seemed the logical solution. Your family needs you. The program needs you. This way, both requirements are met." "Logical," Tom repeated, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's one word for it." Reeves hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic openness. "When my father was wounded in Afghanistan in 2002, his commander arranged for him to recover near our family instead of at a distant facility. Made all the difference in his rehabilitation. I figured Captain Garrison deserved the same consideration." The personal disclosure surprised Tom. It was the first time Reeves had shared anything about his own history beyond professional details. "Thank you," Tom said simply. The teams made progress. Reeves continued, returning to more comfortable professional ground. "Rodriguez has taken point on implementing the traditional wind reading techniques. Jenkins is showing particular aptitude for the environmental assessment protocols." "And you?" Tom asked. Reeves met his gaze directly. "I've been studying the original Garrison equations. Dr. Logan provided access to your papers from the 80s. Remarkable work, especially considering the computational limitations of the time." Tom nodded, acknowledging the compliment without false modesty. "Different tools, same physics." "That's what we've discovered," Reeves agreed. "By understanding the underlying principles, we've been able to identify where the electronic systems need human override. The integration's been surprisingly effective." They reached the vehicles of medical transport for Michael and a staff car for the others. As they prepared to depart, Reeves handed Tom a folder. The updated training protocol draft. "When you're settled, we'd appreciate your review before submission to command." Tom accepted the document, noting the professional presentation and thorough documentation. "I'll look it over tonight." As they parted ways, Reeves straightened subtly. "Range 40800 tomorrow, if that works with your schedule, sir." "I'll be there," Tom confirmed. The next morning, Tom arrived at Range 4 to find the team already assembled and engaged in their warm-up routine. The changes since his departure were immediately apparent: more structured approach, greater attention to fundamentals before technology deployment, and a cohesive unit dynamic that had been lacking during his initial visit. Rodriguez spotted him first, calling out a greeting that brought the others to attention. The operators gathered around him with genuine welcome, each man expressing appreciation for his return. Reeves approached last, allowing the team their moment before addressing Tom formally. "Welcome back, Sergeant Garrison. We're ready to proceed with the advanced integration phase whenever you're prepared." Tom surveyed the assembled men. "Show me where you are first. Run through your current protocol." For the next hour, Tom observed as the team demonstrated their refined techniques. The improvement was remarkable, each operator showing greater understanding of the fundamental principles behind their advanced systems. Where before they had relied primarily on technology, now they used traditional skills to verify and sometimes override the electronic outputs. As they concluded the demonstration, Tom nodded with satisfaction. "Impressive progress. You've taken the basics and built something solid." "We had a good foundation to work with," Reeves acknowledged. "Your techniques have proven invaluable, especially in variable conditions." The team gathered for a briefing as Tom outlined the next phase of training, advanced integration of human judgment with technological assistance, culminating in a comprehensive field exercise to validate the new protocols. As he spoke, Tom noted the attentiveness of the operators, particularly Reeves. The Major's transformation from technology-dependent to balanced practitioner represented the exact shift the entire program aimed to achieve throughout special operations. The day progressed with intensive training, each operator receiving personalized guidance. By mid-afternoon, when they broke for a brief rest, Reeves approached Tom with a question that revealed how far his thinking had evolved. "Sir, I've been considering the implications of these protocols beyond sniper operations. The principles of integrated assessment, human plus technology, could apply across multiple combat disciplines." Tom nodded, pleased by the Major's expanded perspective. The specific applications change, but the approach remains valid. Technology serves the operator, not the other way around. "Exactly," Reeves agreed. "I've drafted some preliminary thoughts on wider implementation." He hesitated. "With your permission, I'd like to develop it further, perhaps as a formal proposal to command." "Good initiative," Tom approved. "I'd be interested in reviewing it." The exchange was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar truck. Tom recognized it immediately as the vehicle bringing Kate and Michael for their promised visit to observe the training. As the truck parked at the edge of the range, the operators paused their activities, watching with interest as Michael navigated his way out with crutches, Kate hovering protectively nearby. Tom moved to meet them, conscious of Reeves following at a respectful distance. "How was therapy?" Tom asked his son. "Challenging," Michael replied with a grimace that turned into a determined smile. "But productive. Doc says I'm ahead of schedule." Kate's expression confirmed the assessment. "He's pushing himself hard, too hard if you ask the physical therapist." "Garrison family trait," Tom noted dryly. Michael's attention shifted to the range and the operators who had discreetly resumed their activities. "So this is the famous team. Mind if I observe for a while?" "Of course not." Tom turned to make introductions. "Major Reeves you've met. The others are Sergeant Rodriguez, Specialist Jenkins," and he continued around the group, each man acknowledging Michael with respect. As the afternoon session continued, Michael settled on a bench near the command tent, observing with professional interest. Kate joined him briefly before departing for a scheduled tour of the base medical facilities, where she had once served as a young nurse. Tom noticed an interesting dynamic developing, Michael occasionally engaging with the younger operators, sharing perspectives from his own recent combat experiences. The current generation of soldiers were eager to hear from someone who had applied similar techniques in actual operations in Afghanistan. Near the end of the day's training, Tom found himself standing with Reeves and Michael, the three men watching, as Rodriguez led the other operators through a complex targeting exercise. "Your team's cohesion has improved significantly," Tom observed to Reeves. "They're functioning as a unit now, not just individuals." Reeves nodded. "Your influence, sir. The shared techniques have given them a common language." Michael studied the Major with interest. "Dad tells me you were skeptical about traditional methodologies initially." If Reeves was embarrassed by the reference to his earlier attitude, he didn't show it. "I was overconfident in our technology and underappreciative of its limitations. Your father provided a necessary perspective adjustment." The honest admission impressed Tom, further evidence of Reeves' growth. Technology fails, Michael said simply. Usually at the worst possible moment, having alternatives keeps you alive. A lesson we're now incorporating throughout our protocols, Reeves agreed. The integration of old and new has proven more effective than either approach alone. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the range, the day's training concluded. The operators secured their equipment with practiced efficiency, each man checking his station before reporting completion. Tom gathered the team for a final briefing outlining the next day's objectives and acknowledging their progress. As they dispersed, Reeves remained behind. "A moment, sir." Tom nodded, waiting as the others departed. "I wanted to inform you that General Hartwell has approved my recommendation for a permanent integration specialist position within the training command. Someone to ensure the traditional skills continue to be passed down alongside technological advancements." "Good thinking," Tom approved. "Who are you considering for the role?" Reeves met his gaze directly. "Initially you, sir, but understanding your retirement status, I was hoping you might consider helping us identify the right candidate, someone who embodies the balance we're trying to achieve." The request represented yet another step in Reeves' development, recognition of his own limitations and willingness to seek guidance. "I'll think about it," Tom promised. "There are several possibilities worth considering." As they walked toward the vehicles, Michael joined them, moving slowly but steadily with his crutches. "Impressive work, Major," he said to Reeves. "Your team has exceptional potential." "Thank you, sir. We're fortunate to have had your father's guidance." Michael smiled. "He has that effect, been straightening out soldiers for longer than either of us has been alive." As they reached the parking area, Reeves offered a formal farewell and departed toward the officers' quarters. Tom and Michael made their way to Tom's truck for the short drive to the family housing where Kate would be waiting. "He's not what I expected," Michael remarked as they drove. "Based on your initial description." Tom nodded. "People can surprise you if you give them the chance." "I can see why you came back," Michael continued. "What you're building here matters." The simple validation from his son settled something in Tom's mind, a question he had been considering since their return to Fort Bragg. The integration of traditional skills with modern technology represented more than just a training program. It was a bridge between generations of warriors, ensuring that hard-won wisdom wasn't lost in the rush toward innovation. That evening, as Kate prepared dinner in their temporary quarters, Tom sat on the small porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The Winchester rifle case rested beside his chair, a constant companion through decades of service and retirement. His phone buzzed with a message from General Hartwell. "Pentagon requesting status update on integration program. Formal presentation to Joint Chiefs next month. Need you to lead the briefing team. Non-negotiable." Tom read the message twice, considering its implications. The program was moving beyond Fort Bragg, beyond even special operations, potentially influencing training throughout the military. What had begun as a brief consulting role had evolved into something far more significant. The screen door opened behind him as Michael maneuvered out onto the porch, settling carefully into the adjacent chair. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, echoing Kate's familiar phrase. Tom handed him the phone. Michael read the message, then looked up with raised eyebrows. "Joint Chiefs, that's quite an audience." "Too big an audience," Tom muttered. Michael returned the phone. "You're the right person for it, Dad. Who better to explain the integration of old and new than someone who's mastered both?" Tom gazed out at the darkening sky. "I'm a field operator, not a briefing officer." "You're a teacher," Michael corrected. "That's what you've been doing with Reeves and his team. This is just a different classroom." The observation struck Tom with unexpected force. Throughout his career, he had indeed found himself in teaching roles, passing on hard-earned wisdom to younger operators, ensuring that lessons paid for in blood weren't forgotten. Perhaps this was simply the next evolution of that same mission. "I'll think about it," he said, which made Michael smile knowingly. "That's what you always say right before you say yes." Inside, Kate called them for dinner. As they moved to join her, Michael paused, his expression growing serious. "Dad, what you're doing here, bridging the gap between generations, between approaches, it matters. More than you realize. Without you, someone like Reeves might never have understood what was missing from his toolkit until it cost lives in the field." The weight of his son's words settled on Tom's shoulders not as a burden, but as a confirmation of purpose. The old Winchester, in its case, the Zippo lighter in his pocket with its worn engraving, the memories of Ghost Sullivan and countless others, all were links in a chain that extended both backward and forward through time, connecting those who had served with those who would serve in the future. Stillness before the storm. Tom murmured more to himself than to Michael. His son nodded in understanding and wisdom to weather it. Together they went inside to join Kate, 3 generations of service gathered around a simple table. The past, present, and future of the warrior's path united in common purpose and shared understanding. Outside, night fell over Fort Bragg's stars, appearing one by one above the training ranges, where tomorrow Tom Garrison would continue the ancient work of preparing the next generation to face whatever storms might come.